There's Dr. ABC. I'm his biggest fan. Welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Sim Kapoor, and I have the privilege of serving as OISE Director of Advancement Communications and Internal Relations. We are so overjoyed that you have taken the time out of your summer busy schedule to listen, discuss, and explore the details of Dr. Reid and Dr. Eizadirad Anti-Asian Racism Report. Before we begin today's discussion, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We hope by discussing this report and its nuances that we're continuing to appreciate the unique role and relationship that each of us has with the land and the importance for us to achieve reconciliation in every single day. Before we proceed, I again warmly welcome you, and I would now like to request our esteemed Dean Erica Walker to say a few words. Dean Walker.
Thank you, Sim, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to all of you. Welcome to OISE. I'm Professor Erica Walker, and I'm very proud to serve as Dean here. I want to thank Dr. Mary Reid, Professor here at OISE in the Curriculum Teaching and Learning Department, and Dr. Eizadirad, OISE alum and Assistant Professor at Laurier University, for their visionary work in carrying out this critical and important study, naming systemic racism, acknowledging complicity, and a commitment to action, anti-Asian racism in the York Region District School Board. When Mary first told me about this report earlier this year, I knew that it would be important for us to have an opportunity to hear from the authors and to hear the voices of the young people and members of the YRDSB community. I'm so grateful to Mary and Ardavan and Sim Kapoor in her office for working to organize this event. This groundbreaking report, I believe, will be tremendously impactful. In addition to telling stories that must be told, it has actionable and important recommendations. And I commend the YRDSB for their efforts to enact those recommendations. And I'm very proud that OISE faculty and alumni are doing this work. It is in keeping with OISE's mission to advance education, human development, research, and professional practice around the world, and more importantly, to work to solve and resolve issues around racism, prejudice, and other harm. But we are here today to ensure that this report lives in the actions we carry out from today forward, that these recommendations don't just live on the pages of the report, but are enacted in our daily lives. And so, to provide opening remarks, I want to introduce Dr. Reid and Dr. Eizadirad and ask them to please come forward as I introduce them. Dr. Mary Reid is an Associate Professor of Mathematics Education at OISE here at the University of Toronto. As an executive member of the Asian Canadian Educators Network, she co-leads the research committee, which focuses on examining Asian educators and students' experiences in school. Her scholarship centers on the model minority myth and its detrimental impact on Asian students in mathematics classrooms. And her research and work promote a call to action for solidarity and unity against all forms of oppression by raising awareness and on how and why oppression impacts different marginalized groups in unique ways. Mary has won a number of awards, and too many to list, but I will tell you that her most recent award was in 2022 when she won OISE's Award for Excellence in Educational Leadership. Dr. Eizadirad, who earned a master's and PhD from OISE, was an instructor in the School of Early Childhood Studies at Toronto Metropolitan University and in the MT and Bachelor of Education programs here at OISE before being appointed to Laurier. He is an Ontario certified teacher who previously worked for the Toronto District School Board. He's the author and editor of several books, most recently in 2023, enacting anti-racism and activist pedagogy in teacher education, Canadian perspective. Thank you both, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for graduating.
No, that's not yours.
Sorry.
Did anyone take the speech?
Who saw it?
I just had a little bit of a heart palpitation, okay, so thank you. Thank you all for being here. I feel so honored and privileged to be in the presence of such an incredible group of people. You are here because you are all committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And my soul is just being so nourished right now to be in the presence of all of you. So thank you for being here. I want to share with you my positionality and its location to the research that Eizadirad and I conducted regarding anti-Asian racism in schools. My name, you all know me as Mary Reid. My Chinese name is Nyuk Min Xiao. And I'm an associate professor here at OISE. My pronouns are she, her. I'm of Hakka Chinese descent. I immigrated here to Takaranto, Treaty 13 land, in the 1970s from Arima, Trinidad. Not many people know that. So I do have roots of Arima Trinidadian, and I identify as a Chinese Canadian with Trinidadian roots. I've conducted a lot of research in my time here during in academia. And by far, this research report on dismantling anti-Asian racism in schooling has been the most emotionally charged and has been the most emotionally laborious work that I have ever engaged in. When reading through the hundreds and hundreds of transcripts, pages of transcripts, as well as the pages of survey data results, it triggered so many memories, personal experiences of my own marginalization, experiences of discrimination, and normalization of microaggressions. So I had to really engage in self-love and self-care throughout this process. And I thank goodness for Eizadirad, who really supported me through that. And for those who do research, just take care of yourself when you do get triggered. And for those who read the report, you may be triggered yourself. So take care of yourself, because it is a really important form of resilience when you do engage in self-love and self-care. I also remembered lots of feelings of invisibility, and I felt invisible as a child, as well as into adulthood, because Asian identities are often adjacent to whiteness, which leads to the erasures of our true struggles, true discrimination, and lived realities, which are often denied or ignored. So there's a phrase in Hakka Chinese, dadagi. And when I was bullied as a child, or when I experienced racism, whether it was blatant or subtle, or when I witnessed racism or any sort of injustice, I would tell my father about these incidents. And you know how he would respond? He would say, dadagi. In English translation, dadagi means ignore it. Keep your head down. Remain silent. Don't rock the boat. And it wasn't until my adult years when I realized that this keep your head down mentality no longer works. We need to speak up. Staying quiet and remaining invisible is counterproductive, and it works against our fight for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So today we're rocking the boat. I'm going to be amplifying my voice, but more importantly, Eizadirad and I have amplified the voices of 1,325 Asian identifying members of the YRDSB. And even more importantly, we have legitimized their struggles, their heart-wrenching stories, their lived realities, their personal narratives. So thank you for being here to listen and to understand how this report is a landmark, groundbreaking study. There's no other report like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Sim said she's your biggest fan, I'm your biggest fan, so thank you. So I also want to mention that this research is grounded in cross-racial solidarity, in unity, and allyship. This is an all hands on deck This work requires all of us, and I see so many allies here. I see so many of you really understanding that we need to roll up our sleeves and stand shoulder to shoulder to work towards dismantling all forms of oppression. And although this report is just dismantling anti-Asian racism, we need to also understand that we can't realize the dismantling of anti-Asian racism unless we also dismantle anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia. We also need to dismantle anti-Semitism and classism and ableism and sexism, and the list goes on, sadly. But we've got to ensure that all forms of oppression are disrupted. And we need to use our power and privilege to do that and equip ourselves with how to acknowledge it and call it out. The intersectionalities of all these identities means that oppression is experienced in very unique ways. And we need to understand that as well. So not all marginalized groups are monolithic because of those intersectionalities. I'm just going to give you 3 big takeaways from this research study that I hold in my heart. If you don't have time to read all 75 pages, but please try to read 75 pages, but if you don't, take it from me. This is what resonated with me. These are my 3 big takeaways. Maybe they resonate with you. First big takeaway, longing for belonging. We found a low sense of belonging amongst all members, students, educators, staff, community members. This desire to be accepted, to feel part of the group. And a lot of that low sense of belonging was attributed to internalized racism, feeling otherized, experiencing the perpetual foreigner syndrome because they weren't deemed as quote unquote real Canadians. The normalization of microaggressions was prevalent. It was daily. We had students who wrote saying that I didn't even know these were microaggressions because they're so deeply embedded in our everyday interactions. Being misnamed, for example, was the normalization of a microaggression. Being confused for another Asian person in your workplace. I could understand being misnamed maybe once, maybe twice, but chronically for weeks, months, even years. That means that people who misname you don't even know who you are, and they just see you as this monolith Asian identity. Butchering of Asian names, not having the opportunity or time to really take efforts to learn your names, which forced a lot of Asian students and Asian educators to westernize their names, to anglicize their names, and they can't be their authentic selves. The model minority myth came up story after story after story, page after page after page. The feeling, the pressure, students felt the pressure to live up to that model minority myth. If they didn't exemplify it, if they weren't good at math, it was really led to diminished mental health. They felt embarrassed, they felt ashamed, they had reduced self-worth. And because they were this counter narrative of this stereotype, people felt uncomfortable about that. And as a result, it led to no sense of belonging. Number 2, curriculum and pedagogy. We need to go beyond samosas and dragon dances. Celebrate, yes. Eric. Celebrations is lovely, acknowledging Asian culture and events and holidays, and it's a good starting point, but it cannot be the end destination. We need to have anti-racist pedagogy. We need to have culturally responsive pedagogy. We need to learn about Asian perspectives also beyond historical atrocities. So when you learn about the history of Asian perspectives, and it's only through the lens of victimization and helplessness, it really does deceptively imply that racism happened in the past and that everything is good today. And we know damn well that everything is not good today. We have current manifestations of a lot of racism, and we need to be able to recognize it, name it, challenge it, disrupt it. And that's what anti-racist education is to empower marginalized students to be able to navigate those barriers, overcome those barriers. The last big takeaway is colonial practices. And Artaban, you know, my goodness, this is an amazing partner who I worked with. He taught me so much. And Andrew, I know you're saying yes, yes, because you and Artaban have done so much research together. By the way, it was Andrew who suggested that I invite Artaban on this project. So thank you. That's what collaboration and allyship is about. That's what it is. So thank you. Love to you. So we found that there were so many colonial practices that were deeply embedded in the systems. And this is not just a YRDSB thing. This is not exclusively only to YRDSB. This is across all districts, across our province and across our nation. Hiring, advancement, and promotion procedures, we found accent discrimination, name discrimination, negative biases towards that. What do districts value in leadership qualities? Is it bold leaders, assertive leaders, aggressive leaders, leaders who can articulate well and brag about their accomplishments during a 1-hour interview? We found that a lot of Asian educators did not lead that way. They led quietly, collectively with a team. They didn't brag because that's not part of their cultural norms. So we want really diverse leaders in our system. We must be able to have culturally responsive practices that support advancements and promotions. We need, a lot of the Asian educators felt pressure to act white in order to fit in and to be able to move up the ladder, thereby not being their authentic selves. We need to break that bamboo ceiling, and we need to break it fast in order to diversify our leaders. That is my 3 takeaways, and I hope it resonates with you. I want to end with some thank yous, very important thank yous. Thank you to Dean Erica Walker for your incredible leadership, and the Dean's office for offering this space to share this critical research. Artaban and I are so grateful for this event. Sim, Perry, Natalie, Marianne, thank you so much for the hard work in making this event happen. To our research assistant team, I know you're here, stand up, raise your hands. If I call your name, you're an amazing researchers, and we won the lottery when we put our team together. Tasneem Ahmed, Chanel Chow, Kiara Daw, Phoebe Kang, Minnie Lee, Joshua Lim, Kelly Lynn, Neil Ng, Asia Reid, Rachel Toe, and Simon Yang. Thank you.
Are you all standing up?
Yeah, stand up. These research assistants represent University of Toronto, McGill University, and Laurier University. The future of academia is in good hands because we got incredible researchers right here under this roof, so thank you. We also want to thank Karen Hong for her graphic design of the report. It's beautifully designed because of your amazing talents. Karen, if you're in the room, raise your hand. Dr. Stephen Reid, thank you for volunteering your time for your meticulous copy editing of the report. Yes, your attention to detail ensured clarity, consistency, and accuracy throughout the report. And deep appreciation goes out to YRDSB leaders. The chair of the YRDS board is here tonight, Chair Ron Lin. Thank you for your support. I gave a workshop. If he's here, just raise your hand. Thank you, Ron. I gave a workshop about just over a year ago in April of 2022 to the Board of Trustees. And it was about dismantling anti-Asian racism in education. And soon thereafter, Ron Lin, Cecil Roach, another trustee, and also the Chinese Canadian National Council members. I don't know if Eleanor's here, but yes, Eleanor, thank you for being here. CCNC, love goes out to you. Community members are important. So I met with a few of the people there, as well as affinity groups throughout the YRDSB. If you're part of the affinity groups, thank you so much for being here tonight. And Cecil and Juan, and as well as CCNC members were asking, how can we make this beyond a one-off workshop? It was a 2-hour workshop via Zoom, and that's You know, sometimes we need to go beyond that 1 hour workshop or a 2 hour workshop. And I offered to Cecil, I said, we could do a research project. Why don't we amplify and legitimize the voices of Asian members of the YRDSB? And wholeheartedly, without reservation, Cecil said, yes, let's do it. And that's when I invited Artavan on board. So thank you so much for your unwavering commitment. I don't want people to view this report as a criticism of YRDSB. The themes in this report, like I said, is not exclusive only to YRDSB. These themes are prevalent across our nation. In fact, YRDSB should be commended for initiating this research and for being bold and brave because they own these research findings. So no other district has engaged in this kind of research. So you are at the forefront and you, I know, are working on the recommendations. So thank you. Thank you to the YRDSB leaders, Lori Davenport, who's the administrative assistant to Superintendent of Education. Fazia's here, Fazia Durrani, thank you so much in the bright pink, beautiful. It was such a pleasure to work with you. She's principal of Inclusive School and Community Services. Dr. Ken Nam Liu, thank you for being here. Superintendent of Education, Freya Phillips is Executive Assistant to Associate Director of Education, and Cecil. Cecil, where are you? Cecil. Associate Director of Equitable Outcomes in Schools. I hear you are retiring in September, so I just thank my lucky stars. We thank our lucky stars that we had this opportunity to work with you on this report. Thank goodness, so thank you. And finally, and most importantly, we owe an enormous debt of gratitude for all the participants who willingly shared their lived experiences and realities. 1,325 of you. Your compelling stories really shaped this research, and without you, this would never have been the study that it is. So thank you, Meek Witch. I'm handing it over to Artavan now. Thank you.
One, two, three, mic check.
Okay, you hear me? All right, well, thank you. I won't have all of it memorized like Mary, and my style is going to be different. So mine is a bit of a poetry and a narrative from the report combined, just to switch it up. So I'll start by saying, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. In terms of my positionality, I was born in the city of Rasht in Iran, and I immigrated here with my parents in 1998. It's hard to believe it's been 25 years, but that's kind of how I entered the space, being West Asian. And I think we make a good team. You know, Mary dressed up, I dressed down, more formal, I'm a little bit more informal. That's why we make an all-star team. And I also gotta, you know, before I get into that, I gotta thank my wife who's here, Sierra.
Yeah.
She supports me all the time. When I'm on a project, I lock in, and you know, she really allows me the space to just do what I need to do when the idea comes to me, and I really appreciate that. So I wrote a poem. I actually wrote it this morning, so that's how it's authentic. It's called "We Are Asian and Proud," and it's a bit of play on from the themes and the criticism you get when you do equity work or you have a report that can have different entry points into it, right? Not everyone agrees with everything you say, and that's a reality. So here it goes. Where are you from? Where are you really from? Anti-Asian racism. Is that even a thing? Aren't you all good at math and come from dual parent households? What are you complaining about? Daily realities for Asian affirming identities. But first, a bit of geography lesson with a sprinkle of statistics. Asian diasporas and identities are vast and rich. So hashtag represent. If I shout your region, put your hand up and make some noise and get out of your comfort zone. East Asia. South Asia. Southeast Asia. West Asia. According to the York Region Municipality Census Report, the two largest visible minority groups are Chinese and South Asian. And the top 5 countries of origin for recent immigrants to your region are China, Iran, Philippines, India, and Pakistan, while South Korea, Hong Kong, and Sri Lanka account for 3 of the remaining top 10 countries. And I think we have quite a beautiful representation here tonight. Most popular languages spoken at home other than English are Mandarin, Cantonese, and Farsi. Pan-Asian diversity encompasses unique cultures which have enriched and strengthened the social fabric of Canada. Almost half of the immigrant population in Canada was born in Asia. In 2016, 48.1% of all immigrants were born in Asia, including the Middle East. Asia has remained a top source continent for immigrants in recent years. And from 2017 to 2019, 63.5% of newcomers to Canada were born in Asia, including the Middle East. In 2016, Asian countries accounted for 7 of the top 10 countries of birth of recent immigrants, including the Philippines, India, China, Iran, Pakistan, Syria, and South Korea. And don't get scared by the statistics. By 2036, immigrant born in Asia could represent between 55 to almost 58% of all immigrants in Canada. Now you might say, thanks Artaban for the stats, but what's the point? What exactly is anti-Asian racism? Do you want the dictionary definition? Here it is. And we use it in the report. It's the historical and ongoing discrimination, negative stereotyping, and injustice experienced by people of Asian heritage based on others' assumption about their ethnicity and nationality. This includes overt and subtle racist tropes and stereotypes at the micro and macro levels, contributing to their ongoing social, economic, political, and cultural marginalization and disadvantage and unequal treatment. You got all that? Oh, you didn't. I know that's quite academic and mouthful, so let me break it down. It's when they invite you to come to Canada to build the railroads, but they charge you a head tax to become Canadian after, because in their eyes, you don't belong. You're just a guest good for your label. Hashtag 100 years later anniversary this year.
Yes.
It's when your children tell you, pack me a sandwich. I'm scared they will make fun of me again when I warm up my traditional food at lunch break. It's when people have self-doubt and hate themselves for their eyes, willing to spend thousands of dollars to have eyelid surgery. It's when you got to change your name to get a chance at opportunities. It's being blamed for not being able to drive properly. Not every car accident involves an Asian. It's when people want to bleach their skin to look more whiter because ideal beauty is socially, culturally constructed based on colonial standards rooted in whiteness and body shaming. It's the exclusion and discriminatory immigrant policy which required all immigrants to arrive on Canadian shores by continuous journey, excluding immigrants from India, as at the time there was no continuous boat or ship from India, as they had to stop to refuel. It's Canada using the War Measures Act to send 21,000 Japanese residents into crowded internment camps when they were treated as prisoners of war and their properties and assets seized and sold by the government, with many deported back to Japan without any answers. It's being blamed for the September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center. It's being afraid to walk in public in your hijab, being spat on, or people pulling your hijab off your head randomly. It's being called a terrorist with a chuckle seconds later that it's just a joke. It's looking for representation of Muslims on TV, but all the representation is in the form of stereotypes, either extremists or violent terrorists. It's being blamed for the cause and spread of COVID-19. It's being spat on, randomly attacked because there has to be a scapegoat for a worldwide pandemic. It's not seeing yourself at school in the books. It's not having a teacher or a listener that looks like you. This is why I show up like this, so people could recognize professors. You don't always got to be in a suit and a tie. It's feeling like you don't belong, leading to self-hate and wanting to be more white. It's being told that you should be and how you should act instead of allowing us to be our authentic selves. Hashtag shit is real. Hashtag we live it every day. Hashtag we need systemic change. So please listen with an open mind, heart, and soul. Of course, thank you for coming today. We don't want to discuss Olympic of oppressions. Today is about Asianness and anti-Asian racism. Let's try to stay focused and on the topic. We want to share with you what we know from our daily realities. There's something there which speaks to how systems have failed us, including the education system, including higher education, such as places where we are today and where I work, including higher ed educational institutions. If I love you, I got to criticize you so you can be the best version of yourself. We tell that to our kids. Why can't we do it as openly with our institutions? Who holds institutions accountable? How should we hold them accountable? That's a question I leave you with to ponder in your respective leadership roles as you leave here today. Naming systemic racism, acknowledging complicity, and a commitment to action. Matter of fact, don't read all 75 pages at once. It can be dangerous and triggering. Break it up and pace yourself. Over 1,300 research participants through focus groups and surveys. Big ups and a shout out to my colleague and friend, Dr. Mary Reid, and the wonderful research team whom many are present here and many couldn't make it, but hopefully you'll watch the live stream. Working together to capture perspectives of students in grades 7 to 12, teachers, administrators, and committee members. Boldly and bravely sharing their pain, trauma, and frustrations. So matter of fact, as much as you give us the highlight to be here today, it is them we should be thanking for speaking up their truths. There's responsibility as researchers to handle their truth with care, and we hope we paid homage to that. And as listeners and as leaders, there's responsibility to not dismiss their truths, but rather indulge in it. Listen to what they're trying to tell you. Listen through all your senses, because an improved education system from an equity approach mitigating anti-Asian racism is an improved education system for all. Hashtag let's chop it up. Hashtag let's break bread with love, respect, and gratitude. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's Q&A now, so if you have questions, comments, criticism, now's the time.
There's the mic.
I think you could use this one.
Oh, there it is.
We have this one over here.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Hi. The mathematics of language, the arithmetic of grammar, true stucco, the discrimination of tragedies. Pay equity is the difference between, let's say, a principal and a custodian, all the way down to maybe a waiter or maitre d'. Employment equity is the concept of discrimination. These concepts were brought into play in the 70s. We evolved in minorities. Stockyard DNA is your mind as a camera, your inventory of academia. Blink and you make a picture of your DNA. This is called your RNA. In between is a protein of information that could be the cure or remedy for the next pandemic and the stopping of another stock market crisis. What is the hidden axiom behind this meeting of assessment? The children's round table of moral quadratics, redressing in the shadows, the need to assess in committees and in communion, the revolution of reconciliation. In between your DNA and RNA may be a self-discovery of the diversification of social justice.
We got to collaborate on a poem now.
Yeah.
Thank you, it was beautiful.
That'd be the word. For the live stream.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that. Others?
Hello, I'm a student teacher and I'm hoping to graduate next year. And I think a lot of these ideas like really hit home. And I've seen racism towards Asian teachers in schools in my practicum. And I was wondering, how do you think like me as a new teacher can bring these ideas into a new school when a lot of schools are really behind on these ideas?
Yeah, thank you for that. But congrats on graduating soon and entering the field. That's always exciting. For me, I think it goes back to relationships, right? Like you're navigating hierarchies of power. Unfortunately, most of our institutions, there's an order. So you gotta figure out who's gonna be on your starting team, right? The custodian. You know, when I started teaching, I learned a lesson. They told me the two most important people in the school are the custodian and the office folks. They can make your life miserable or very easy, right? So you want those allies, and then you have to build a relationship with the administrators, you know, find community, hopefully at your school. If not, online is a great place to find community of like-minded people. And that's really a good place because one, you can get ideas, you can also vent. And you need to do that when you do this type of work where you're challenging something that's the norm. You need community to heal and to breathe and sometimes re-strategize. And so I think for me, that's how I do it. There's no one way of doing it, but trying to stay authentic to who you are. I'm really conscious of that. A lot of times the systems want us to conform to get an opportunity. So maybe you try to bend a little, but don't break your values, and then use it to create change. And also just amplify the voices of those who also care like you, right? Like it could be students at your school who feel that way. So instead of, you know, inserting it through yourself, if it comes from the students and it comes in numbers or it comes with other staff as allies, I think it carries weight. So I think a lot of times we talk about like what we should do. We don't spend enough time talking about how strategically to do it. And I think that piece is a big part of it to actually get the result you want.
Thank you, Eizadirad. I'm also going to say leadership matters. So we need systems that diversify leadership roles. And we found that there was a significantly not enough Asian representation in vice principal roles, superintendents, and there's this real bamboo ceiling. So we need to ensure that Asian voices are at the table when it comes to decision-making policies and procedures. And that leadership really matters. So that's all part of the colonial practices. And once we get more leaders that represent the Asian voice and perspective, diversified Asian voice, because obviously we're not a monolithic, then I think it's going to be easier for new teachers like you to come on board and to feel safer to be your authentic selves.
This will be wait for the next question. For both of you, can you just contextualize the conversations that you were having, each and every one of them that you were having with your interviewees, the nature of what was revealed in those conversations, and to what extent you learned something about them, but maybe about yourselves within this very crucial research.
So when you have a research study with this huge scope of over 1,300 participants, and we had focus groups, they poured their hearts out to us. And the research assistants are just nodding their heads right now because they knew they're part of the facilitation of the focus groups. And even in the survey data, we read page after page, stories, heartfelt stories of harm, of trauma. And what I learned about myself is that it validated my experiences of anti-Asian racism. And what was really sad was that I'm old and this is still happening. I remembered examples of being invisible, people telling me that I'm not racialized, that I'm adjacent to whiteness. When I was in high school, that's still happening now, 30 years later. And that leads to the erasure of the struggles that Asian people face. So we need to speak up. And I always go back to my Hakka Chinese roots. Dadagi is not going to be abided by anymore. We need to be loud and we need to really understand how to equip our students with empowering themselves. So that's what I learned. I learned that it's really a sad reality, 2023, and things still seem to be the same.
Yeah, and I would just add, when we did the research, we really grounded it in this concept that there's no such thing as a safe space, but we're trying to cultivate a brave space. and a brave space, being vulnerable is a form of strength. And I think as researchers, when you're dealing with such a large data set, we have to remind ourselves, every one of those is someone's life. It's not just number one of 1,300. Like that's someone's complex life, complex emotions, people crying, breaking down, taking their camera off. You gotta remember those moments to do the data justice, because yes, it's a large numbers, but I think that's why we had constant meetings and we deconstructed it with the research team. We grounded it in what the literature was saying, but also try to do it a little bit different. Like as you read the report, I think it has a bit of a swag. That's not a usual report. And that's trying to keep it real, and that's important. Like you gotta even disrupt the publication process, disrupt how you share findings, right? That process of disrupting the process is just as important as trying to get the outcome right away. And some of that is going to be a long-term battle than a short-term gain.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mary and Ardavan, for
Thank
this
you.
wonderful work. I think one of the great accomplishments for this report is bringing all Asian communities together. I think that was really something I experienced while I was helping with the data collection and all that too. I'm gonna ask you a question about representation matters, that statement Mary had. I think your region, district school board is amazing to put this initiative on, but I'm from a different school board outside of GTA, you know, and there is no Asian representation in the school board, in a teaching pool or staff or in a leadership. So I'm just wondering, I think this is great conversation starter coming from GTA area. How do we expand this, you know, to the rest of Ontario and maybe the rest of the nation? I felt a bit sad, you know, actually, knowing that, you know, my son has not seen a single Asian teacher, you know, in his whole school life, and I don't see any leadership. And when I brought up some of the anti-Asian racism issues at the strategic planning meeting, and the leadership had no idea, and that was their jaw dropped, you know. So this kind of how can I don't know if I should say ignorance, or just it's not in their radar. How do we actually help them aware and bring these kinds of conversation to the table?
Thank you. Yes, good question. We need to mobilize this knowledge. We need to mobilize this research, and that's what you're all here for, because you are all advocates in your own way. And to mobilize this knowledge, to cite this as references as part of your own writing is really important. That representation certainly matters. And we need to be speaking up loud and clear. I was going to say something and just escaped my head, but I'm going to hand it over to Ardavan, and if it comes back, then I'm going to respond. Oh, I know what I was going to say. We did not sanitize this report at all. And I'm going to be very critical of University of Toronto, because like Ardavan says, you love your institution, you need to criticize. I was on the University of Toronto Anti-Asian Working Committee, and I was not happy with that report. You could put that on record. I don't care, because you can't fire me now because I got tenure, but it was sanitized.
Yeah.
There was not one recommendation that really portrayed the authentic voices of what those focus group members were saying. And I was really disappointed. And I wanted to ensure that our report really amplified the authentic, compelling stories. So that's what this report does. You cannot hide from, and you can't sugarcoat. This tells the heart-wrenching trauma and harm and the pain that Asian members have experienced.
I'm not tenured yet, but I guess doesn't matter. I'm gonna take a different take on it. I definitely agree with that, but I think it's on us. Like, it's on us as parents, as teachers, as the conversation we have with our kids, with our students, because who hold institutions accountable? They serve us. So if you look at someone from a higher socioeconomic status, you know what they're good at? They're good at advocating for themselves. They're good at calling the company and saying, you know what? My plane ride was 2 hours late, I deserve credit. And if they say no, they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write you a bad review and this and that, and finally gonna get something, right? If you go and knock on that principal's doors every day, you write to the school trustee, you make enough noise, you put an op-ed in the newspaper, guess what? They're gonna start listening to you, even though they don't like what you're saying. So I actually like it when I see conflict, because that means somebody's challenging the status quo, right? So we're not all in the same position to do the same type of advocacy, and that's where intersectionality, your positionality, your vulnerable circumstances come in. But you got to connect with people. Like, you got to have your superstar in your team who is tenure and can amplify what you want to say. That's called being strategic, right? I'm just giving an example, but it is very important, because community work and to have an institutional turnover, it's not going to happen by one person making noise. It has to be collective. And once the amplification happens and more people come on board, it's more likely to get the result you want. So it's on us. If they say no, say, come back again, ask it in a different way, use different terminology, say there's another incident, right? Document it. Get other people involved. So we have to hold institutions accountable because they serve us, and they have to recognize that. And you have to know your own rights as part of that, right? Give you an example is, you can record any conversation. The school board tells you you can't record a conversation. According to the law, if you're involved as a direct recipient of a conversation, whether on Zoom or in person, you can record a conversation, even if they do, you can't. How many people know that, right? So you gotta learn how to navigate the system, because the system was designed to privilege whiteness. And you don't have to be white to privilege whiteness. You can be colonized to the point where you actually perpetuate it without knowing it. So you have to recognize how to navigate the system and teach your children and your loved ones how to navigate it, because that's a big part of it. And that comes to access and opportunities and a lot of other things.
Okay, we're short on time. We'll have time for 3 more questions. We'll make this very brief, unfortunately. Here you go.
Will do my best. So 2 points, as a student from the Social Justice Education Department on this floor, I would like to give heads up to people that we recently had a hire announced for Asian studies specifically. 3 excellent candidates were shortlisted. Students were there, listened, asked questions. It was Zoomed. So we're waiting for the decision of the powers that be, which one gets, we would like to keep all 3 of them. Maybe there is a way. Good points that came up during their job talks. Hope, how important hope is, and how important beauty is. One of the presentations had such beautiful, gorgeous images, art. And I would invite people to think about the numbers that were reported, the percentages that were reported. What does that point to? I also happen to be a member of the executive of the University of Toronto Graduate Student Union, the president. We have funding for events. We organize events. We're inviting members to take the lead on events they want, on activities they want. So start activities. In what direction? That's where I'm going. There is one way of doing social justice and social justice education that I like a lot, and numbers help a lot. Holding space for beauty and wisdom. I personally am very much interested and deeply grateful to Indigenous traditions everywhere around the world, and especially from Asia, any part of Asia, Tibet, China, India. There is very, very deep, profound wisdom for peace, for holding the kind of consciousness that would enrich our lives. And that's my very gentle invitation. Sorry for the clock.
Thank you. Cecil.
Thank you. Just quickly, Mary, first of all, thank you folks, thank you too for, I think, raising the awareness in the York Region District School Board. I mean, the fact that you use the word complicit in your title, and I know it hits some people hard, but I think it's important for folks to understand that you can both experience racism, be working against racism, and still be complicit in structures that are perpetuating racism. But I'd just like to get your perspective on something. You talk about elevating community voice, and I know in York Region, that's one of the challenges we have is Asian community voice, which seems to be absent. And I'm just wondering what's your perspective on it, because often with other, I'm going to call them dimensions of diversity, we know that the community out there, when, for example, folks experience stuff because schools can't do everything, obviously, that therefore their voices in the community who you can elevate and can be there for support. That's simply missing in York Region for the Asian community. I was so happy that CCNTO came on the scene, and even though they're not York Region based, and I sort of wonder, where is the York Region Asian community voice for strong advocates who are anti-racist or who would advocate for children and so on, and will support those who are working inside the board to do the same thing. I'd like to get your perspective on that.
That was one of. Hello? Hello?
I think really good.
Battery's dead. That was one of our recommendations. And Eleanor, I think you can have can you give it to Eleanor?
Oh, sure.
Eleanor's from CCNC. She's an amazing community advocate. Eleanor and I have been working over the last year and making sure that the Asian voice is amplified. So go ahead, Eleanor.
Thank you. I was actually about to raise my hand as well. I went to YRDSB schools. I consulted. I was part of the research group, actually, the focus group. I promoted it with youth I work with, and now I'm with CCNCTO. So I work with the Chinese Canadian National Council Toronto chapter. We are based in Toronto, but we support folks in the greater Toronto area, including YRDSB. So we do work a lot with not just Chinese students and parents, but we partner with a lot of Asian identifying community organizations in the greater Toronto area, including in Markham, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, Thornhill. To just make sure that students and parents are empowered. And that, I think I'm also part of the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee at YRDSB. I do a lot as a community member because a lot of the issues I recognize in York Region, unfortunately, graduating over 10 years ago are still there. And I think that's why it's important to acknowledge complicity. And I'm really glad and grateful that that term is in the report and in the title. I think a lot of the report recommendations really echo what a lot of community members have said. And the recommendations put forth, I want to see how we can implement them from the bottom up. And I think that community partnership role is essential in that, because again, educators can't do it all. We can do it with community. And I'm eager to continue working with YRDSB and continue looping in the organizations I work with as well with YRDSB to make sure we can kind of get an overarching community voice in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, when you lose faith in the system, you become disengaged.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting for folks to perhaps come to the school board, the question is, how is the school board going to community and gaining their trust? It's a different way of doing the work. And I think the community partnership is a great entry point because they already have the trust. And if it comes through them, there's a level of authenticity. Whereas if it comes directly through a school board, they might just say it's the same old stuff repackaged. And that's not just with anti-Asian racism. That happens all the time. When I was canvassing for people to vote in the hood, it doesn't matter what politician vote, it's the same crap. They're not gonna do nothing for the hood. All right. So the trust and the relationship building is so important. And without that, none of the big stuff can happen. So that would be my take.
Thank you. Okay. One last one.
Thank you. Alumni, and I'm also a Asian parent with a daughter in grade 7 now. So I think it's quite amazing to read in the report with very clear headings of theme and with statistics and with simple English. I think it's parent-friendly report as well.
And I'm quite touching to have so many recommendations in the report as well. So, but I'm also an internal control and process expert. So I want to ask how many recommendation is already taken as the agenda and action plan by the school board. And as a parent, how I can measure the school board will really execute the recommendations.
Good question. Accountability. Yes, action, accountability. You are right, Dr. ABC, and thank you so much for that really important question. I do have some good news. So we did deliver a very important workshop, a release of the report to all the senior leaders, all superintendents of education. Cecil was there. And they reviewed the recommendations and really coming together, putting their heads together to figure out how these recommendations can come to life instead of just sitting on a shelf collecting dust. So those are really, there's already some recommendations that have already been started. And part of the recommendations is to measure them and to revisit them on a cyclical basis. So this is like the entrustment. When we did deliver that workshop, we said, we take the report and we give it to you. We are done. Accountability is now on your behalf. So I'm not sure if Cecil wants to respond or maybe Chair Longman, but Ardeman, did you want to also talk about?
Yeah, I would just say, now you're the advocate. I mean, we try to do the advocacy through the writing and we'll continue it. But I think email the report to your principal, email it to your school trustee, right? If there's 10 people who do that, that's gonna move up on the priority item in terms of being discussed at the next meeting, right? If the report comes and goes after today, then it might collect dust. I'm not saying it will, but the more you amplify it, the more you legitimize it, the more likely it is, which is why I say it goes back to all of us. It's not on the leaders. It starts with us to say, you serve our needs, and this is a need that is not addressed. And we have to continue to make that an issue and work with people in power who see it that way, who can help amplify it. But there's lots of leaders from the board. I know there's different moving parts as they've shared with us. And in September, there'll be a more grand plan with some of the other moving parts in terms of timelines for implementation. I'm not sure if folks from York Region want to speak to that, but there should be, and you should follow up with them in the fall of what is the plan.
York Region gets the final word.
Yeah. So yes, there is a plan. The report was released in May, and we certainly are looking at this in the context of some other reports that we have to start in September. So I mean, and we, as Dr. Reid said, we already started to implement particularly the employment piece around trying to narrow the gaps, for the employment of our Asian staff. So that's already on the way. So yes, it doesn't want to stay on the fence. I know I'm retiring, but and this is why I talked about and some communities will not allow it to sit on the fence, and it's important that the Asian community as well don't allow the board to get away with considering this. This is why I talked about ways we need a strong Asian community voice as well, to ensure that this will make this happen. Because that's been our experience with other communities. When they come at us, and those of us inside the work, we tend to get more done when we have the community coming at us as well as those staff who work internally.
Well, that concludes our event today. I would like to thank Dr. Mary Reid and Dr. Eizadirad. I hope this is enriching for everybody here. Well, certainly was for me. And as they said, the work continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.